Hello and welcome to the Bible Nation Society podcast. I'm Doug Levesque. With me today is Pastor Jason Georges of Emmanuel Baptist Church. We're here to talk about how the Bible affects culture. The Bible is the best culture. It's proven, and it works. What are we standing up for? The ability, the freedom to do what's right as God defines that right.
God's the ultimate author of liberty.
We don't want government to stand between us and our freedom to do what is right.
All right, we're back. Is America getting too old? Apparently, as of this year, America is going to tip over the top and become older than it is younger, right? Everyone's going to be qualified for Social Security all at once. That's going to bust the system, I think, entirely. So some people are asking whether it's healthcare or politics, different aspects of society, is America getting too old? What do we do about it? It's a problem, right? It's like the zombies are coming to town, and we have to come up with a way to, exasperate and solve the problem, when really it could be a blessing to have so much wisdom around. So how do we look at that? How does the Bible look at that? How are we going to solve this situation? A lot of people have been asking, as we talk about these different topics, what is our take on current events of the day? And so this week I had a couple things catch my eye. So before we get to that, let's talk about a couple of things. The first thing was that over at the World Economic Forum called Davos, which is basically, the devil and his minions trying to rule the world, right? I'm going to blow up the world. We have this guy, Yuval Noah Harari. He's a philosopher. He's an atheist. He's a vegan. He's a homosexual. He's everything that's wrong with society. And unfortunately, he's also from Israel. But he's affecting that atheistic culture that comes out of there. And he's always, the big thought, the big philosophy behind the World Economic Forum. So the World Economic Forum doesn't approach economics and world governance as though there's a God and we answer to him and we serve him. It actually answers from this philosophy that man is his own God and has to take his own destiny in his hand. And Harari's got a lot of popular books. In his new book is called Nexus, A Brief History of Information Networks from the Stone Age to AI. He's dealing with artificial intelligence and how man can use that to control his destiny. He's previously written Sapiens, which is about man, and Homo Deus, which means man-God, right? And it says, we're living through the most profound information revelation in human history, but we can't understand it unless we understand what has come before. And so it sounds good, right? It sounds like a happy philosophy. Nexus, the book, doesn't argue that understanding the past enables us to predict the future. My goal is to show that by making informed choices, we can still prevent the worst outcomes, because if we can't change the future, then why waste time discussing it? Kind of a moot, circular reasoning sort of thing, but basically saying that AI is going to be our salvation. Let's all look to AI, let's invest in it, and then let it solve our problems. Let's all agree that what AI says is what we're going to do. Climate change, older population, and so let's let it decide the medical, decisions. Everybody turns 70, you get one more year, and then, say goodbye, sort of thing. And this is the philosophy that's behind all this stuff. And so yet we have a new book out. I don't have the book. I think I'm going to get it. Yeah. I'm going to read it, and we might actually have a podcast just about this, the Nexus.
No, that's interesting. It's in the news.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a little tidbit of something that's out there, letting people know some things that are on our radar map. What else you got?
That's strange. News? Yeah. Okay. So the religious nuns, Nones, okay, are now
I thought you meant like Catholic nuns and the whole bonnet and the whole thing. No.
Yeah, they're not the largest single group. Yeah, no, those are shrinking. Okay. Religious
non-religious
nuns,
people,
right, are now the largest single group in the U.S.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Now that doesn't mean they're over half or anything, but Catholics are like 24% and Baptists are 17%, right. And but the nuns are there. But there was another article that said this was from NPR. There was another article that said that people thinks that it's hit its peak. In other words, it's things are kind of evening out. There's enough nuns there. Now the nuns are going to start getting converted,
right,
so to speak. So, but we are at this nexus where their philosophy is what guys like Harari are saying. Right. So, people that don't believe in God have a different culture, and we're going to have different results in that.
I will say, the pulpit has been saying for the last 10 years that we are in a post-Christian America.
Yeah.
And we would acknowledge that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think our policy that we're seeing coming out of Washington reflects that.
Yep.
But I would say anecdotally,
Mhm.
as pastoring here in 2024 now, that I am seeing more people that are coming to church for the first time
Yep.
with no background, and they want a more quote unquote traditional or conservative church experience.
Right.
Now they don't know why, and they don't know why that would be right or good. They just know they want church to be church.
Right.
And they have a semblance, an idea of what it ought to be. And really what's common is it ought to be different than their other experiences in their life.
Right.
So what they do at the ballpark, what they do at the stadium, what they do at the bar,
Yeah.
that church should not be like that.
Right.
And so I do think the pendulum is spinning. That's a good article you found.
Yeah.
What's the next one you got?
Okay, we got Politico says populism keeps rattling the globe. Elites have no idea what to do. Again, at Davos, the number one problem is no longer climate change. It is Trump and misinformation. And so this is a play on controlling information. And anyone who does disinformation or misinformation, which that's arbitrary, like who's deciding that? They want to be the decider of that, can be subject to legal ramifications. And so they want to control information. And they're saying that this populist ideal and free media has conspiracy theories or alternate information that they deem is not true, and therefore that's our biggest threat. And Davos is saying, this is our philosophy, this is where we're going, we're heading to the nexus, and anything that anybody else says is a problem. And so we need to control information. So this year is about controlling misinformation. And so, the Argentina president got elected, and he showed up at Davos and basically gave an incredible speech saying, you guys are wrong. You guys are all dead wrong. You've been proven wrong over and over. And so I thought that was incredibly brave of him.
Which, kind of wrap this up, is the idea of the genius of our American founding.
Yeah.
When our founding fathers enshrined the right of the freedom of the press,
Right.
which was the freedom of information.
Right.
And they were beyond their times.
Right.
And they didn't see AI. They didn't see these different information control systems that would
Right.
come. But yet the principle still remains true. So those are three great articles that just kind of a little bit keep your eye on.
Yeah.
Got some AI stuff going on. Keeping an eye on the culture of religious trends, and then also the control of information.
Yeah.
I'm excited about our topic this morning. Is America getting too old?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the question, and I think the politicians are saying it, and it's going to start dictating our policies, and it's going to bring America to this collision of some real ethical crisis.
Right.
And as you look at these articles that you have set up for us, talking on this topic, I think there's an underlying theme here of where we're heading. And it mirrors the abortion debate. I'll just kind of put that.
Sure.
It's the other side of this. We argue about the beginning of life, but now we're going to be talking about the end of life.
And most of the topics we talk about, they're not necessarily obscure. I mean, they're in the news, every news thing, every nation, and but they affect the culture. And so the Bible addresses them, and the Bible does address folks getting older, and it does address how to treat them and what their crisis and issues might be. And so. This was in the news this week in every outlet, and every nation is talking about this, but particularly the United States, because the CBS article that we're looking at, boomers are a large part of the population, basically is saying that whether it's retirement Medicare or the 401k problem, it's like everything's a Ponzi scheme, and it doesn't work at this point. We've kind of crossed the Rubicon on making the financial aspects of this thing work. And so that's how the younger generation is looking at it. This is a problem. This is going to affect my retirement, or so to speak. And so they're looking 40 years in the future, and they're seeing us as an obstacle. And I say us because I am 54 years old, and I'm in the over the hill game. So
yeah, ageism is a discrimination that we'll all experience.
Right.
Everyone will have to go through that. That article you're referencing there makes note that this year we have the largest American population hitting the age of 65 ever in our history, which means the pull or the load upon our Medicaid, Medicare system is going to be greater than ever.
Right.
And so we're all paying into that,
Right.
and the load that it has to hold now is growing. And then talking about Social Security, if you plan on being alive by 2030, Social Security, as it is currently constructed, will be depleted by then.
So when I was a young minister coming up, I was 21 years old, got ordained in gospel ministry. legally, someone that's being paid by a 501c3, a church organization, and you're a pastor, you have an option to pay into the Social Security program or not. Mm-hmm. It's only pastors and congressmen, I think, that get that option of what they're going to do.
Yeah.
So I weighed that, and I met with financial observers way back in the day, and they said at 2030, or even they said by the time you're of retirement age, Social Security is not going to work. It's not going to pay. And even back then, it was paying 4% dividends, which you could get bank CDs that were 11%. You could get money markets that were 15% or whatever. So they basically said diversify, and Social Security is not going to be your salvation. So I said, okay, I'm not going to pay into the program. I'm going to take that money and I'm going to do something with that. Okay, and so now we're kind of coming of age, and it's this brick wall is actually approaching faster than what they said, and so therefore it's not just that people are getting old is the problem. It's that younger people are saying our future is being jeopardized by these old folks or whatever. So yeah, but it's partly our philosophy, it's partly our politics, it's partly our economics, that we've decided to do on this, and getting people kind of dependent upon that. It is an issue. AARP, right, the Retired Persons Association, have an article about how older adults are changing America. An aging population is shaking up our country, why it's happening, and what it means. And it says they're affecting economy, culture, society, and politics, penetrating deep into the very marrow of the nation. Mm-hmm. So it's no longer, most of the guys that signed the Constitution, our founding fathers, these guys were 35 years old. Mm-hmm. I mean, the old ones were over 40. And of course, the population was, younger. But now we have this situation. We got two guys running for president pushing 80. You know what I mean? And that's never really happened before for us. We, the people at midlife and beyond, represent the third largest economy in the world after China and the U.S. as a whole.
Wow.
So you think about that. Boomers have the money.
Right.
After the whole China, which is a communist nation, so that people don't own the money, the central government owns the money. And then the U.S. as a whole, which is our full economy, the biggest thing on the planet is boomers in America. So they are the pocketbook. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. These people are people who have worked, they've earned, they've relied and trusted in the system. Maybe they've falsely relied on a lying system, but nevertheless, they're there and they have something to say. They have issue. Another one of the statistics the AARP says is that the number of workers 65 and older has mushroomed by 117%. In other words, they're not retiring because Social Security isn't covering it. Mm-hmm. It's not paying for it. In a span of 20 years, so over 20 years, that's increased 117%, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Remarkably, employment of individuals 75 and older has increased by the same percentage, which means people are hitting 65 and they're still working.
Right.
They're hitting 75 and they're still working because it makes sense.
Well, and that's twofold. Number one would argue that it's the necessity, right? They have to work because Social Security is not there.
Yeah.
But we're living longer, and we're living longer and more productive lives.
Right.
65 today does not look like 65 before.
Sure.
I mean, back in the day, 65, you were kind of nursing home, senior citizen, and yet now our 65-year-olds are living like 45-year-olds.
Over in France, which had the same problem, but they're actually accelerated, Macron, their president, just basically shut the whole country down because he was trying to move the age of retirement back. And I mean, they rioted in the streets. Yeah. They've had the same issue in Japan. And here's an article from the Washington Post that talks about Japan can teach the world a better way to age. They've had a measure of success in handling this kind of flip-flop, upside-down situation with retired personnel. But, of course, they're relying on cat cafes and caregiving robots. So they're taking technological, fictional ideas, having the robotic cat as your pet, you're taking care of it sort of thing, and your kids are on the other end of the cat talking to you, sort of thing. So they're using technology to where the family is in contact. So their culture, even though it's not Christian, it's pseudo-spiritual, but it's not Christian, and yet they're infused with respecting your elders in Japan. Not every culture is like that, but Japan is, and so the kids do take responsibility for the parents. And that's the only way that they're succeeding because they're ahead of even Europe in that situation. So, I think the United States has biblical culture to look at, but also just has a culture that respects its elders where the family takes care of the parents. So there's a couple things to look at to kind of maybe solve what are the perceived problems.
Yeah, well, and I think in Japan, and particularly those Asian countries that have some form of ancestry worship, they bring that in to their culture of taking care of their aged ones.
Yeah.
But there is the same mutual respect, and we're going to get this when we get into some of our scriptures in a little while, that the Bible teaches us that we ought to respect our elders.
Right.
Now, not because of ancestry worship,
Right.
But because of their place that they
not even because of authority, not
Right.
even because of their elder status.
Right.
So the Bible does put that out there. And so Japan, in a way, honors that biblical principle. It's not, they don't have a biblical culture, but that particular slice is there. And the problem that every nation is going to face now, and that we're facing, they actually are handling well, because that little principle is something that they're taking hold of in their culture.
Well, and you think about how the Westerners live and how Easterners live, and of course, a young person or a middle-aged person in an Eastern country, they're not buying a house for themselves and a house for their parents.
Right.
They're all living
Together.
in a domicile together.
Right.
And so that concept of needing 2,000 square feet, needing 4,000 square feet, which is quite frankly very an American concept.
Sure.
I mean, our houses are bigger than anyone else's homes in America and what we require for living.
And our property lots and all that.
Right.
Kind of stuff.
We just have ranches, in comparison.
Yeah.
And
nothing wrong with that.
No.
But,
But that might the idea of mom and dad live over there and I live over here may need to break down.
Sure.
Because the feasibility of maintaining 8,000 square feet for two households is inefficient and not the best way, and relationally might not even be the best way.
Another aspect that kids are having to adapt is mom and dad's worked one job for 25, 30 years and had this retirement from that income or whatever. And young people today are having to work 5 jobs. They're having to work 5 gigs to have the same amount of stuff. And so a lot of them are just saying, we're not going to do that. We're going minimalist.
Yeah.
They're kind of changing the way we do things. And a lot of them are deciding not to get married or not to have kids. So this is the selfish side of that problem, because if you could increase the junior population, right, through marriage and childbearing and stuff, then you would have an economy that could bear the older people, and it wouldn't be an upside down pyramid where you have young people and old, trying to hold all the old people together. But this would sustain that. But when you have abortion, when you have that selfish aspect, wrong aspects of marriage, et cetera, you're kind of agitating the bad parts of that situation.
Well, yeah, and you think about, it's a double-edged sword, this topic, right? Because we have an aging population that has a superior health system to their predecessors, so they are living longer, and now we have a shrinking a shrinking birth rate. So not as many people are making it into the adult productive years to sustain the system. So yeah, the system is going to crumble. But I think inherently when we talk about this topic, apparently, particularly in American culture, the reason we struggle with this topic is because of selfishness.
Right.
So this topic is never approached with selflessness.
Right.
It's always approached with, how do we take care of them to the minimum level required and yet still maintain our own style of living, our own freedom, our own ability to travel, do all these different things. And this is truly a product of our own selfishness.
Yeah. And so on the older folks aspect of things, spending half of their income on healthcare and trying to stay alive, or beauty, getting hair plugs for us balding guys or something, that's kind of a selfishness that, you're focused on. Well, I'm going to keep working. That's not a job for a young person. Or, I'm going to try to keep maintaining my lifestyle or whatever, and not handing that off, not handing the business off, not handing the finances off or something like that. And then for the young people, it's selfish because, well, I wish mom and dad would just move on so that we could have some of that goodness or whatever. So it kind of both sides. So that's why I thought we'd discuss it, because there's a panic. Yeah. Last week we looked at, war in 2024. And we didn't really think about the fact that there would be a war of the ages, a war between old and young, too, and that's part of, people get afraid, they get selfish, and then they start to kind of move against each other. And then sometimes the media, works that up a little bit. So I thought, hey, let's talk about this topic. It's real. Those are some of the issues.
Well, and it's an election year topic.
Yes.
Because every year what both parties will try to do is drive people to the polls, because who votes? Old people.
Yeah.
And they will drive them to the polls with fear.
Yeah.
They'll, fear of their Social Security, fear of Medicaid or Medicare, fear of these benefits. And when you get old, one of the frailties of a senior citizen is fear.
Sure.
Because your capacity and your ability and your strength and your ability to overcome has really reduced. And so you and I in our pastoral work often have to deal with a senior citizen who is really dealing with fear
and you
that
can
they never had
you can
before.
become curmudgeon.
Yeah.
You can become curmudgeon. And, that's not what the Bible wants either, right? To have the joy of the Lord, that is an eternal, youthful outlook on, death's not going to stop me, and the pains of youth or the pains of age aren't going to hurt me. I'm going to serve the Lord and serve my brothers and sisters in Christ and my fellow and God and my fellow man. So that we need to maintain.
There is a Christian maturity to embracing the season that God has you in.
Right.
And life is seasonal.
Yeah.
And really, it's immaturity to try to hold on to a season that is no longer, that's not the season of your life anymore. And so we've all seen the old 20-year-old or 30-year-old who's still trying to live like the college frat boy.
Right.
And then we've seen the 60-year-old who's trying to live like a 40-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, no, embrace the season that you're in.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of this conversation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I have a scripture here from Leviticus 19:32. Thou shalt rise up before the hoary head and honor the face of the old man and fear thy God. I am the Lord. And so this is in the unique book of Leviticus that most people don't read or totally understand. All the priests were Levites, but not all the Levites were priests. Okay? But all the Levites did serve in a priestly caste where they had jobs to do. And if you read very carefully, there were things that started from 20 and went to 40, 45. There were things that started at 25 and went to 45, 50. And so everybody had this 20-year service that had a start point and an end point. Now, even when it was done, you were still of the Levitical caste. You still had identity, purpose, and everything else. And you still had the courses of the priests through the year, through the annum, and you would go and serve even as the old guy. But the burden was on this 20-25 year service orientation.
Right.
So man, there's a little bit of a lesson there in that guy running a business or guy running a church, take your 20-25 years, run strong or whatever, but you're not a success without a successor.
Right.
And God kind of built that into ministry. You should be bringing up young people and then giving them opportunities. And when they get fruit and success, they bring themselves up the notch, and who can be trusted to take the wheel, at a certain point in time. And I think that's with government, business, family, all those different kinds of things. Older folks have to, at some point, raise people up where you can trust the younger generation to make good decisions. Even for you, or healthcare or whatever.
Well, and I think that passage you're using there brings us into some of these applications that we were talking about here. And one of the applications we noted in our notes here was the church focus. Yeah. And whereas seniors are often, and in modern churches, seen as a burden, they're actually seen as the ones that are holding back change and growth and progress. Right. And concerted efforts are made to basically run them out of church. Right. And that's the complete wrong perspective that the church ought to have towards our seniors.
Well, and even the idea
they're not a burden; they ought to be seen as a blessing.
Let's have the old person venue and the young person venue,
right?
And that's separating them. That's causing that problem because then when you got to finance something or you have to vote on something, these people want a skateboard park at the church, and these people want a travel bus. Right. You got two different things, $100,000. What are we going to vote for? And and one's valued, one's not. And so we can't have selfishness, and we can't have division. So the church focus, I think, needs to number one, we're going to include old folks. We're not leaving them out. Right. But number two, we're going to integrate. Church focus has to be integration. Right. There has to be the majority of times that we're functioning together. Yeah, old folks can have Bible study at McDonald's. Whatever. Young folks can go to the water park or whatever we're going to do. But there needs to be 90% integration in church worship, ministry, evangelism, finance, whole nine yards. The culture of the church needs to include that.
To the level that you don't have distinctiveness, you don't have segregation in the sense of two separate churches that are trying to occupy the same building, but even more than that, familiarity. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
that becomes work for the pastor and the staff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there a place for children's ministries? Yes. Yeah. Is there a place for seniors ministry? Right. Yes. Because it gives you an opportunity to address things that are very particular to that season of life. But there also should be a concerted effort for familiarity with one another.
Yes.
So that all of those ages appreciate each other.
Yes.
And are comfortable with each other and can commingle very easily.
Yes. And that's the answer, because if the churches are doing that, that's going to bleed out. That's the salt and light in the community, and other ideas will come out in other sectors, of society, so that the church would say, you know what, we're gonna make sure everybody gets their focus. Listen, in evangelism, 80% of people that get saved are usually 11 to 18 or 11 to 19. Right. So yeah, you should put your evangelism efforts and monies and all that kind of stuff into your young people and getting the gospel out, et cetera, et cetera. But that doesn't mean you don't go to the college campus. That doesn't mean that you're not having a family conference for young marrieds or something. And there's still 20% that get saved, and a percentage of those are going to be people with the hoary head, right? That they're old and they finally, wake up to the fact that there is a God or whatever. So you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. In any of those things, the church has to focus on keeping things together and integrated, and at the same time meeting the different needs. Right. That's a burden of a pastor, but that's what a pastor's for. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and there's that to be intentional and strategic in it.
So I put on here age interaction. Yeah. In that we have a Christian school, which is young people. The people that teach in the Christian school, the people that pay for the Christian school and participate in the different activities are mostly parental age. But we have annually a grandparents' day to bring grandparents in. Most grandparents didn't get to see Christian education. We had public education. So they're like, what are you guys doing? And they don't know, is the value worth it? Or is our kids going to end up weird or something like that? So we bring them in and let them see what it is and what the investment is. And once they see it, they quit giving their kids a hard time about it, and they actually start pulling out the checkbook, right, writing some checks on things, and then they can come by and volunteer to watch recess. They can come by and volunteer to help grade papers or those kinds of things as well. That's just in the Christian school, but in the church that can take place as well. And so, I know you have Sunday nights, which older folks come back on Sunday night for church, but we'll have our kids choirs, sing, and the older folks love that, and there's interaction, and there should be more of that in churches, not just old folks night and young folks night, right. But however much interaction we can have, it needs to be the same.
Well, and then it governs the philosophy of how we do things, and so our philosophy of even how we worship. Right. It's not we're traditionalists or that we want to be old. Right. Our philosophy is we want our worship to be accessible to every group in our church. Yeah. So from young and old can participate. Right. We want it to be accessible, and we want people to participate. Yep. It's not a performance. Yep. And so that governs how we worship in such a way. So grandfather can sit next to grandchild, and they can both participate at the same level with that. And there's not such a variance of style that it neglects one of them.
And I think that's harder today. I mean, let's be honest. I think
it is one of the battles of the day.
There is the fabric of society is being pulled apart, and that's in the church as well. And so, but I think pastors don't give up on the work of that, and plan it and trust God for a measure of success in that. And then when you see it, elevate that and keep going after it.
And any church strategy that sees a particular group as a hindrance is a wrong church strategy.
Absolutely.
It's a wrong church program. So we got to get rid of all these old people, or even on the flip side, we got the old. You said the curmudgeon. Yeah. You can have the senior who has no flexibility to allow the auditorium to get beat up and dirty for a youth activity. Right. And that's a little bit of a cliche.
You got to create a culture that says, hey, there's holes in the wall, there's stains in the carpet, we're doing it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And the old folks can actually learn that and adopt that as well. Yeah. Music and worship, old folks are like, we don't want rock and roll in here. Well, we don't want rock and roll, but we want live music. Right. It has to be alive. And
we're not at the funeral yet.
Yeah, it's not a funeral dirge. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not all high classical music, which is just as wicked and evil sometimes as rock and roll is. Right. But also the kids need to realize, you're not going to come in here and sing rock and roll. And so there has to be a merging, not of rock and roll and classical. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying
classic rock.
Classic rock. You heard it here, Pastor Georges. Going rock. But it has to be a purpose interaction. I put on here in-home visitation. Yeah. I know most of my pastoral career, even when I was just interning and stuff like that, was making sure folks got in-home visits, especially when they were at a point where they couldn't get in church. I've been ill where I couldn't get in church, and so having a phone call or a letter, having that kind of system, having somebody visit from the church, you know what I mean? I know when I was pastoring, sometimes I couldn't visit everybody, but if someone went, I'd say, hey, tell them Pastor Doug sent me. Let them know that they're on the radar and then that kind of thing. And so I think they value that. And it doesn't have to be an hour-long church service. I mean, it can be 10, 15-minute prayer. Bring them something, Sometimes bring them a bag of oranges when they're on sale, or just bring them church bulletins. Bring them, some good literature or something like that. And that's one ways you can do the interaction, because you can have the youth group, on any given, if they have Wednesday night youth ministry or whatever, get parents or other folks to take the kids and drive them to so-and-so's house and go in there and sing a song for them and read a scripture or whatever to shut-ins or something. That's a way to have interaction when you do that, to have in-home visitations. I know our youth group sometimes will send our teen boys out to rake leaves or shovel snow, up here in Michigan. Like, some people won't come to church because they don't have the wherewithal to get the snow out of their driveway or even clear out of their car or something like that. And so if church staff and deacons and things like that are focused on that, it's part of the integration. It's part of the culture. You got to build into the culture right away. We get into church planting, and a lot of church planting philosophy says, hey, I'm going to gear my church towards 20-somethings, right? And so everything about how I approach them, how I dress, how our worship is, what the auditorium space is going to look like. It's what our event calendar is going to look like. It's all 20-somethings. Everybody that tries that fails, and here's why. Because 20-somethings will come and put $5 on the plate, but they won't tithe regularly. And they're not, because they got 5 sources of income, they might tithe on one of them, but they're not tithing on all of them. And so, that doesn't work because it doesn't pay for itself.
Right. Or we're going to attract young families.
Right.
But young families are a particular season of life that they don't have as much availability for service.
Right.
I mean, they're raising young kids and they got these things. And yet you're trying to elicit workers. So you need every age group. You need every demographic.
They say there's the 7-year cycles. Kids get in the church or youth group and they got 7 years in that, and then they go. Then you've got the college young adult. That's a 7-year cycle, and then you've got young marrieds and young children. There's a 7-year cycle, and people kind of re-up in their church life. Maybe not their spiritual life, but their church life. And so all that has to be integrated so that everybody feels like, I can see where I'll be in church here, what my role is. I saw what the so-and-so family did when their kids left for college and how they stayed engaged. I saw how that family did when she became a widow and how she stayed engaged or whatever. And I think that's the culture of the church. You don't plant a 20-something church. You plant a church that's cradle to the grave, everybody, and you work on integrating that from the beginning. And as churches leave that, because of the pressures of society, then churches lose their saltiness, affect that. What about relationships with seniors, families? And I talk about partnerships in ministry, getting different senior families together to do stuff. Maybe not just the fall color tour trip, on the bus, but our seniors are going to go to the senior citizen home. Our seniors are going to go visit shut-ins. Our seniors are going to go and hand out tracts or newspapers, or in other words, everybody has to be partnered in the church and even partnered with each other in different families. And so, Emmanuel does fellowships of different age fellowships, but there has to be some integration there with families. And then lastly, I put legacy, giving, and impact. And some people, particularly of the boomer age, probably made more money, had more investment opportunities. Maybe you're living a little bit higher than the next generation will live, and have the wherewithal to not only leave their family something, but to leave their church something. And there's a lot of people that they pass, and it's the church, it's the pastor that says, hey, can you guys go in there? And you end up with their house and all this kind of stuff, and nothing's been said, and so you're trying to find family, and so you're not trying to just get whatever they had if you're an honest broker. I mean, how many times have we've been held with this older person died, and whatever they had, whatever they were, it's all kind of for us to take care of. We're trying to find family so that they can make decisions. We're trying to find family so that they can get in the house and get the furniture and all that kind of stuff. And then sometimes it's a hassle because we're just trying to take care of the person because they didn't do that. So I think if we build into the culture that you can be a legacy, take care of yourself now, take care of your family now, and help think that way, help get a person to be proactive for their family's sake, right? And then for their church's sake, and be able to include that in the culture without it being a greedy gimme.
And it really comes down to seniors having a vision for that season of their life.
That's it.
You gotta have a season. You gotta have a vision for your life, and really, that vision starts before you're a senior.
Yeah.
So if we're defining seniors as 60 to 80, right?
Sure.
That last, then in your 50s, you're doing the things to prepare for that next season.
Yes.
You're thinking about that. When I'm in my 60s,
Yes.
I would like to do this.
Yes.
When I'm absent from the body and present from the Lord, when I pass away, I would like to be able to do this.
Right.
But then ultimately, one of the greatest rewards for faithfulness of a senior is to worship together with their children and their grandchildren.
Or their great-grandchildren.
And they've all taken that same, and what a legacy. And, I'm not very sentimental,
Right.
but one of the things as a pastor I do get sentimental about is seeing how God has rewarded the faithfulness of some seniors, and they're worshiping with their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, because that faith has been passed along. And it's not about holding them tight.
Right.
Some of them are sending them off to the mission field and whatnot, but that they are still walking with their same God.
To hand off to the next generation the right perspective, to hand off to them everlasting life, to hand off to them the real political idealism of Jesus as King, the real miraculous perspectives of death can't keep me down, and have that pass on. And I would hate for my kids just to come to church and say, well, we're making Dad proud or something like that. I would hope they'd have their own relationship with the Lord. But culturally speaking, even if it doesn't pass off personally, if it passes off culturally, and so people they're familiar with going to church, they're not afraid to bow their head in prayer. That's good for society. That's why I say Bible Nation Society, because when we pass that off, at some point it dissipates into nothingness. But where that light is overshadowing a dark culture, even if someone's not saved, they're in the light. They're being reflected there, and that's what you want to give to society. And this is one of those topics that's splitting society, that's in crisis mode, and that the church can really affect. Let's read a couple scriptures, Pastor Jason.
Yeah.
I'll read one. You read one. Proverbs 16:31. The hoary head is a crown of glory if it be found in the way of righteousness. So it's not I'm gray-headed. Worship me, respect me. It's I'm the hoary head, but I've got the crown of righteousness on me. That's worthy of respect.
Psalm 71:9 says, "Cast me not off in the time of old age, forsake me not when my strength faileth." So there's an appeal.
That's a prayer.
Yeah, it's a prayer.
It's a prayer.
And then he goes on, 92:14. They shall still bring forth fruit in old age. They shall be fat and flourishing.
Well, fat is true.
There is, fat is true.
Yeah.
There is still opportunities.
Yeah.
There is it's a different type of profitability, but you are still purposeful in your senior years.
I think if you talk to most senior citizens that are faithful in churches, they built the church, they paid for the church, they're committed to the church, even more than other people would know,
Right.
and they don't want to be left out. They want to be included. Most of them would say, "I still got something to add."
Right.
Whatever that is. I know we have one dear senior saint, 80 years old plus, and he shows up every Sunday morning and walks the property with a trash bag and picks up trash so that nothing's sitting around.
He's one of our oldest.
He's one of our oldest guys, but he's like, "Oh man, I'm still physically fit. I'm going to come and serve the Lord. I don't sing, in the choir. I'm not really a preacher. I can't do all the work days like I used to, but I can still come on Sunday." And part of his worship is coming and do that. And to me, I hope our young people see it.
Yeah.
I hope our young people see it and integrate, and that someone would go out and work with him.
Yeah. Walk a lot.
Every Sunday.
He walks a lot, picks up trash.
Interact with them, yeah.
Yep.
And then Isaiah 46:4. And even to your old age, I am he. And even to the whore's head will I carry you. I have made and I will bear. Even I will carry and I will deliver you. And, that's the message is God's not just the God of the young. He's the God of the old. And people see him when they're young and make decisions, but people need him when they're old, because he's the one that carries them. One of the things that comes with old age is the old brain, the old mind, the old memory starts to be affected. And that creates sometimes a fear or apprehension. And it doesn't help when young people are trying to push you aside.
Right.
in the church or anywhere else. And so they need to rely upon God. God sees you. He knows you. He'll carry you. Don't be afraid and start trying to take every vitamin that there is to take or go to a shrink or all these different kinds of things. Just read your Bible and trust God. Fill your mind with the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bible's a good culture for an old man or an old woman because they'll just keep praying. They'll just keep trusting. They'll find out He's the best friend they ever had, right? He more than your spouse, more than your kids. God is your best friend. And I'll tell you, Japan's doing a good job at respecting their elders, but America can do even a better job if old folks themselves would wear the crown of righteousness and they would not act afraid and they would not act selfish, but they would just love the Lord Jesus Christ with all of their heart, all the days of their life, show no fear, pave the road, put the signs up, paint the road, and let people see how it's done. So this is not just a charge to young people. It's a charge to old people too, to let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father, which is in heaven. Thanks for joining us today. Remember, the best culture is a Bible culture. It's proven and it works.